those of you who were here yesterday, you may have already heard our logistics and code of conduct information, but for those of you who weren't here, I'm going to repeat it. In the event of fire, we're going to exit through the side doors, and we're going to go to the parking lot that's past the security gate at the other side of the street. Just follow me, we'll show you what to do. For Wi-Fi instructions, you can find those at the registration desk. Virtual participants won't be needing those. If you have any trouble, let me know. Some folks, it hasn't operated, they don't receive the prompt right away. So just come to me, we'll work with you, and we'll get you on the Wi-Fi. At some point in the instructions, it will ask for a sponsor's email, and you can find that at the registration desk. Also, there's a page that will show, based on your last name, which sponsor you're going to enter in for that Wi-Fi login. And you can set that to expire at the end of the workshop, so you don't have to do that every day. We ask that you don't bring any food or drink into the auditorium. They're kind of strict about that here, so we want to make sure that we respect the space and we are invited back to use it again. Restrooms are down the hall. They are towards the front of the building. You can look at the ceiling and you'll see the symbols for the restrooms, and you'll find them that way. For lunch options, if you didn't already order a box lunch from the Cloud Cafe, which is excellent, by the way, there is another cafe within walking distance, Cafe Atrio. It's at the top there near the intersection by River Road. Let me know if you need directions. We're also doing an optional happy hour today. If you want to join us, we're going to be going to Denizens and relaxing and schmoozing a bit. There's an optional sign-up sheet by the registration desk. It's just for us to get a head count and for folks to kind of see who's going and be able to organize carpools from there. In-person attendees, if you have any questions, there may be time at the end of folks' presentations. They are kind of short sometimes, so if there's not time for questions in person, you can always ask them on Slack and get your questions answered there and continue the conversation. Folks who are tuning in online, please make sure to mute your microphones when you're not speaking. And again, post your questions in the Slack channel rather than the Google Meet. If you post them in the Google Meet, we will just direct you to the Slack channel. And unless speakers have requested otherwise, all sessions will be recorded. This is just an FYI. And we have hard cutoffs to remain on schedule because we are very tight on time. We've scheduled ourselves to the minute. And so we've got signs that will flash at the speakers that say 2 minutes remaining, 1 minute remaining, and time's up. Please pay attention to those and wrap up your presentations accordingly. And co-chairs are going to be helping us take notes for this meeting so that we can give you guys a really good workshop summary at the end of it. And that's it. Let's get right in.
Morning, everyone, and thank you, Shira. I also just want to give her a quick shout out. This workshop would not be occurring without Shira. She's done everything from managing lunches, coffees, breakfasts, logistics, our speakers. She saved my bacon more times I can count. So we just give this young lady a quick round of applause. This would not happen without her. Now that I'm done embarrassing her, welcome back, everybody. We're doing requirements and needs for SQS applications part 2. Mark and I thank you guys all for coming. Remi, are you online?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Allow you to share.
Yep. All right.
Okay. And
are you seeing my presentation? Are you seeing it?
Yeah, we see you, Remi.
Okay, and you see the presentation as well?
We see your presentation, yes.
Perfect. Sorry for that. Okay. Well, I'm Remi. I'm calling you from Denmark, and very pleased to be participating to this workshop. So I've put together this presentation with a few colleagues, some of them from the US and one from Denmark, coming from various organizations. I'll describe that in the next slide. Our presentation deals with NOAA reanalyses, and in particular, the way it's used in wind energy and power system modeling. So we are all users of those data and thought it was a good time to provide our basic requirements for the next generation of reanalysis from NOAA. So the outline of the presentation is very simple, just a short introduction about who we are. And then a focus on this very interesting workshop we had a couple of months ago here in Denmark, together with the IEA folks, about reanalysis for wind energy, very broad topic where very relevant for, I believe, for some of you in the audience. Then I'll stop and discuss the relevance of CFSR and CFSV2 for the offshore wind industry. I mean, these datasets have been massively used, are still being used heavily, and have proven to be very reliable for a number of purposes. So I'd like to stop and show you that. And then we'll move on to those requirements with regards to the next NOAA reanalysis. What are they? And in simple terms. And last but not least, what to do next and how to reach out to us. I think this is the plan for today. So who we are. I'm myself an offshore wind engineer, not designing wind turbines, but designing wind farms. And therefore working a lot with an assessment of the forecasted production over the next decades or so, and as well as wind and wave conditions for design and all sorts of load analysis, etc. Everything you can imagine is needed for designing those structures. I'm working really closely with my colleague from DHI in Denmark, Jakob, who are primarily in charge of producing hindcast data for us, and they are the ones actually using CFSR and CFSV2 for producing those wave hindcasts. And then across the pond, we're always in touch with my good colleague Justin, who now works for EPRI and who is an expert in energy meteorology. And together with Jim, they have the past decades or so being very active in together with NOAA in setting up measurement campaigns and all sorts of interesting projects for the purpose of improving wind energy methods and tools. So that's the small group for today. And you should feel free to contact each of them if you have follow-up questions, of course, on this. So we all met, and when I say all of us, we met all of us interested in the topic from wind energy, plus people from global reanalysis community and regional reanalysis community. We met in Denmark in April this year under the umbrella of the IEA, so International Energy Agency. For us, it's the #1 R&D platform ever since the 1980s. And they help foster discussions between experts from different fields. So the meeting was, simply speaking, aiming at connecting ourselves in wind with the people producing reanalysis. Interestingly enough, that's not something we had done before, although we had been using reanalysis for about 2 or 3 decades now. We had never formally met and had a single meeting where we all spoke together. So that was a good thing to do at first. And of course, we went and summarized the state of the art of the use cases of reanalysis for wind energy. And you can find the proceedings on the internet. Everything is there. But most importantly, we agreed to follow up on a number of actions, which is primarily to keep both communities up to date with regards to what we do, what are our ambitions, and in terms of new data sets when it comes to reanalysis, but also new use cases when it comes to wind energy. And also make sure that whenever there is a new reanalysis coming up, we have a formal interface where we can actually discuss user requirements. And when the reanalyses are there, validation using high quality in situ datasets. Because if there is something we've been good at in wind energy, I believe over the past 40 years, it's been to develop higher and higher quality in situ measurements down in the boundary layer. Very close to the surface, but also high above. Now we have measurements that go all the way up to several hundreds of meters, really high quality wind measurements, onshore and offshore. All right, that was the theme. What reanalysis data are used for in wind energy? So primarily siting, just figuring out where is the wind blowing, where do we need to put turbines. Second of all, correction of in-situ measurements that are typically short-term. We need to long-term correct them. And for my own sake, the design of offshore wind farms, which primarily rely on a blend of model and measurement. And in these models come a great deal of reanalysis. And of course, lots of people are doing many, many fancy things with reanalysis as input to further downscaling. So that's the whole R&D and innovation part. When it comes to power system planning, which is more Justin's area, everything is written down in this beautiful report from SAIC, where they have made a very good overview about what the reanalyses are used for in this sector. So it's not at the wind farm level, it's at the grid level, and I believe many of you are familiar with this kind of studies. But as you can see today, MERA2 and ERA5 are the go-to datasets, and CFSR, unfortunately, is falling short for a number of reasons, but they are not the main users of CFSR. However, in offshore wind industry, we are. So if you thought that ERA5 was our preferred dataset, it is not. And that is due to a major deficiency of ERA5, which is that it underestimates strong wind speeds, which you can believe for design is not a good thing. Underestimating extreme winds and extreme waves is very undesirable when doing design of offshore structures. So therefore, CFSR and CFSV2 are still heavily used and are a very decent fallback scenario for a number of studies. So people know these data sets, and although it slightly overestimates wind speed, which is good for design, we think it is a very valuable tool. However, of course, as you all know, the two model datasets are not run on the same grid. That's causing us troubles. And also the number of parameters that are available in terms of wind speed is very limited. We only have the 10-meter wind. That makes us do all sorts of tricks and fifths to kind of like bring it back to what we need, which is hub height wind speed. So overall, we're not super happy with CFSR and FSV2, but we think that they are reliable workhorses. They can get the job done, unlike ERA5, which can cause us troubles in many, many situations. So here I'm giving you a short example of like what the data are used for. So first of all, people will make a mesh of the entire Europe, a bathymetry mesh, basically to do the waves, and then you'll put some winds that you pre-validate on top of those of this mesh, and then you produce wave. So the wind is used to producing waves, and both wind and waves together are actually used to do design. And I'm providing you here with an example of very interesting study that you can look up. Now, when it comes to the next generation reanalysis, our research requirements are pretty simple. Please don't retire CFSV2 without having a well-tested, robust replacement. That would be, for us, very important to have, because CFSV2 is our backup plan. And of course, when it comes to quality and etc., a good benchmark is ERA5. So you could say when it comes to ERA5, it should be, we believe that the next analysis should be as good as ERA5, just please without the strong wind bias. It's very important to us. In terms of length, 40 years is enough. And in terms of wind parameters, please give us something near hub height, not just 10 meter. It's important to us that we have hourly time series. So no 3 hourly or 6 hourly, we won't like that. So hourly time series are required. And then, of course, a simple API access would do the job. Now, if you really wanted to please us, you could give us wind and temperature all the way up to 500 meter, plus possibly wave data. They can be used as boundary conditions for the wave model. And ideally, and following something we are doing at the moment with ERA6, you could give us some early testing data sets, preliminary data sets that have been used for doing some preliminary checks. We would be happy to take those data and compare them with our measurements. So that is something that we very much appreciate. Yeah, of course, everything you can build on top of that would be great. Something like the CTS would be also great. But you can see here the basic requirements are pretty simple. I hope so. And that's about it for my presentation. Let's stay in touch. If you're interested into the topic, if you're interested into helping us bring reanalysis and wind energy communities closer to each other, you can contact me, you can contact Jakob, You can subscribe to our newsletter on LinkedIn. You can also join a Slack channel, which we have created for fostering those discussions. And that was all really. So yeah, I hope I have kept time now, and maybe you have a few questions for me. Thank you.
Remi, thank you for that talk. As a former commercial meteorologist, I've worked with some wind farms and solar farms. It's really interesting to just see the work you're doing, and it's great to have this outreach to the scientific community and to NOAA. So I would strongly encourage everyone to kind of join those Slack channels and stay in touch with him. In interest of time, we are going to continue right on to our next speaker. So let me introduce Xiaosong Yang from GFDL, and let me get your presentation up here. Okay.
Just use keyboard.
You can just click through. Oh, you can use the mouse with the two keys. Oh, whoops. That one should not be there. That was our backup. There we go. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today I would like to talk about the seasonal prediction of wind energy resources in the US. So this is a little bit of background about the wind energy resources in the US. So the left panel, you can see the right panel showing, the 8-meter wind speed, this annual mean. So from here, you can see this so-called wind belt in the Great Plains area. Yes, all right, is this better? Yeah. Okay, so then if you look at the left panel, here is the utility scale wind electricity generation by state in 2022. So you can see, there's the states, especially in the southern Great Plains. So this dark green means, there is a very high wind energy generation. So this is a little background here. So then what is the motivation of this study? So first, you can see there's a steady increase of the wind energy in the US since 2000. For example, here, this is total wind energy in the US, and this one is, as I showed before, over the Texas, that's about 1/4 in that state in the US. However, renewable energy is very nice, but one thing is it's highly variable on seasonal to interannual time scale because of the atmosphere variability. I think there's a gap. For NOAA, we have very successful prediction of the wind energy on the weather scale. However, for seasonal scale, I haven't seen that. So that's one motivation. Say, what about seasonal prediction of wind energy, if it is predictable or not? So here we use GFDL's SPIL seasonal prediction system. So I think you already hear a lot about this system. So SPIL used for subseasonal, seasonal to decadal, and also feature projection applications. Today, I only, for this study, I use seasonal forecast. I think this forecast already real time in the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, so it's really standard seasonal prediction. So basically, we launch this forecast first day each month, and make 12 months forecast. Here I want to say, for this system is quite successful. We have showing skillful seasonal prediction for very wide range of the phenomena, of the climate variability and climate extremes. For example, the ocean temperature, sea ice, and also the atmosphere rivers over the Western North America. Also, there is some, climate extremes, that heat wave and winter cold extremes. So it's quite a powerful system. So then, how we define this wind energy resources. So here we use so-called capacity factor. So this factor is basically we define the optimal range, how this wind turbine operates. So this is the the capacity factor as a function of the wind speed. So from the seasonal perspective, so we calculate this at 6 hourly time step, then do the seasonal average. So we have done for all the seasons, but today's talk, I only focus on the winter and the spring. And also, we apply the APT. So this is a very powerful method to understanding the climate prediction. So here, before we look at the scale, so we want to see how this model can simulate especially the spatial pattern of the wind energy resources over the US. So the top one showing the 100-meter wind speed. So as I said in the first slide, there is a wind belt around the South Great Plains. So this is high wind speed here. So this is ERA5 data, and the right is model prediction. So you can see, model can simulate predict very well about this wind belt, and the bottom showing the wind power or the wind energy resources. So so they are quite matched very well. So high wind speeds, you have the high wind energy resource. Also, here I want to see that's the annual mean. So here is showing the annual cycle, how this change with the season. So the top one showing the normalized climatology of the seasonal wind power, and the x-axis is a latitude, and vertical axis is a season. So from the winter to the summer and the fall. So here you can see, especially over the southern Great Plains, so they have a maximum in the late winter and the spring, and a minimum in the fall. The bottom showing, there is also very strong annual cycle about the variability. So interestingly is for this spring season, actually, they also have the strong variability. So then, given this, we can look at the correlation scale. So this is one season need for the winter and the spring season. So the top one showing the wind energy resources. So here you can see definitely spring season you have a high scale, especially over the southern Great Plains. So winter they still have a significant scale, but mostly high scale in the northwestern Great Plains. The bottom is the wind speed. So you can see wind speed prediction is very consistent with the wind energy prediction. So next, we are trying to understand why we get this scale. So we apply the APT analysis. So APT is basically you can decompose the forecast based on the predictability or the time scale. So it's very powerful. So the leading one actually, so you can see the time series. This is a model forecast, for different lead time, and this is time axis from 1990 to present. So the leading one is like the trend, and the however, this component, if you look at spatial pattern, so only explain 5% variance. And another thing is, if you project this pattern to observation, actually in observation there is no such a trend. So that means the scale from this one is not significant. So that means this pattern, even you have stronger probability, but doesn't contribute that much to the predicting scale. So the second one, so here you can see this is the pattern, and this is time series. So what we found, this time series highly correlated with the ANSO index, and also this pattern explained 18% to the variance. And also the maximum signal, actually, you can see they are matched very well with this scale map. And also we show here, this is the scale of this pattern with lead time. So you can see, at the first maybe up to a 3-month lead is already above 0.6. That's a very decent scale. And the scale is also significant up to like 9 months. So basically what we're showing is ENSO is a dominant contributor to this scale. So in terms of how do we deliver this information? So one way here, I just show the example. For example, over the South Great Plains, this is spring season. So one way you can, showing this forecast in the normalized form. So you can normalize each forecast by the climatology value and for the observation and model prediction separately. So one thing I want to point out here. So you can see the black, this is the observation. So you can see, because this is normalization, right? So some of the years, actually, you have 20 more percent energy resources than climatology. Some years you have 20% less. So this is a big value. So that means if you can predict this year-to-year variation, that's a big thing, I think, for the energy sector. So here, you can see for this average over the South Great Plains, the scale is above 0.7. If you look at Texas, actually even higher, so you can add 0.8. So what about, also we look at, this is for other seasons, for example. So I separate, so the left is the Northern Great Plains, and the right panel showing the South Great Plains. So you can see, as I showed before, so this spring season, so this is this showing target season, the vertical axis, horizontal showing the lead time. So here you can see that scale is not only just spring, it's kind of very high, from late winter to even the April, May, July, June, and this scale can maintain very high in the multiple lead months. So also this showing for the northern part, actually the scale is lower than the South Great Plain. However, actually one thing is APT also is very powerful, is they can sort of filter out some unpredictable component. Basically, you can enhance the signal. So the bottom line, bottom two panels showing the refined forecast. So what we do, we only maintain top 5 component, then we recompute the scale. So you can see, you see more reds, compared with the raw forecast. So this one just showing, you can do some post-process, use APT to further improve the scale. So here, this is, conclusion. I hope I convince you, this system has a new capability, sort of providing skillful, wind energy, especially over the South Great Plains in the US. So lastly, I want to show you, this is relevant to how, make this forecast even better. So actually what I found is, especially for the winter, so here you can see, this is ENSO regression pattern. So this is observation. Actually, the right one is a model. So you can see, I think also for all the models right now, if you, for the prediction, ENSO phenomena or ENSO index is very powerful. It's very successful. However, this is eddy connection bias still here. So from here, you can see why our model, you have low scale in the South Great Plains in the winter. It's because this pattern bias. So they shift this predictable signal more towards the northwest. So that's why you miss the scale in the South Great Plains in the winter. So I think is the message here is we need to build our model, even improve the ENSO connection. So that's all. Thank you. I'd like to any questions if you have.
Maybe a minute for one question real quick. Yes. One down.
Nice talk, and your conclusion that a lot of this is driven by INSO. Have you done any analysis to see if SPHERE is predicting anything more besides INSO?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, if you look at the variability, right, I found actually I have a table on this. So other modes also contribute. So for example, AO and Pacific, the PNA or even, but that all that mode, we know that for seasonal time scale is lower. But for the first season, actually, they do has some contribution. So yeah, I think especially one thing is for the AO also. Yeah, that's one target I really want to see in the future if we can improve AO in the season scale. Yeah, could be. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We have Stan Benjamin presenting, I think, a really interesting talk here around building an S2S climate-informed West Nile forecast. Stan?
Thanks a lot, Jason. Thanks for coming. Ben Green, who's in the audience here, and myself, we're from Global Systems Lab. We've had a history of trying to do useful prediction after the start of the pandemic. I wondered, was there anything going on in NOAA for health prediction to help that area? And sort of through Tony Fauci, believe it or not, then we started a connection with our colleagues in the climate CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And so we've started some project with a couple of postdocs that I want to describe now with you. And the most recent postdoc is our colleague Ryan Hart, but also with Mike Johansson and Karen Holcomb from CDC. So it's a warning here. We're just barely getting started in this. So this is really the initial work has been not so much working with S2S models, but actually trying to improve the relationships between the health data that we do have for West Nile virus, which is really limited, and also analyses that we have out there like PRISM and GridMet and so on for temperature and precipitation anomalies. So that's what I'm going to describe here. Just to go back, this is almost true for every talk and applications in this conference here. The connections between NOAA and use of health environment data in different applications has changed, of course, with aviation and energy even 50 years ago, like the last talk we had from Xiaosong. We didn't have too much connection there, but that's really changed a lot for energy and using the guidance from NOAA and FAA also for aviation weather. Same thing here is now really we're at the cusp of this with CDC. And so here we are right now with very little interconnection, but we're in a position to be able to do a lot more of that. And obviously it's our goal in general as environmental scientists is trying to serve people. And this is an important way to try to do that, even though the problem is so difficult. So that's already taking place a little bit with extreme heat. I saw a poster yesterday from Li Shu from CPC talking about that, and also with air quality, including smoke. And we're sort of on a cusp now of being able to try to handle vector-borne diseases like West Nile with a connection with mosquitoes, but obviously with birds. Actually, that's a very key part of that whole system. So this is a group of people. So Ben and I are in this picture here. You can see us. Let's see this. There we go. There's Ben and Green and I. And then Ryan Harp, has been our most recent postdoc. Ryan just took a position with PSL, and then Karen Holcomb was our previous postdoc before that. So a really good group of people, and learning to have this cross-culture interaction with CDC has been fantastic for us. And also really want to call out in the climate program office, Julie Turton and Hunter Jones, who actually been able to fund this area and have a keen interest in NOAA contributing in this area also. So West Nile, it's a little bit like COVID. Most people don't have any symptoms at all, 80%, and then maybe 20% will get some kind of fever, flu kind of thing going on. But then 1 out of every 150 about will be able to have this neuroinvasive kind of situation, and will have to go to the hospital. And that's the only thing that we have for health data. So most hospitalizations are like that. Some of you might have heard that Tony Fauci himself came down with West Nile virus. He didn't have a neuroinvasive case, so grateful for that. But if you have that happen, then you're in a pretty bad place with West Nile. So it was introduced in the United States 23 years ago, and we were averaging about maybe 1,300 of these neuroinvasive cases with hospitalization. And it's focused per capita, really more over the plain states, some in the Western US, but obviously in the Eastern US, including Tony Fauci getting it in his garden in Washington, DC, just a couple of months ago. So the vectors are difficult to be able to model exactly. So it turns out you have to have Culex mosquitoes to carry West Nile virus. And, you know, like other mosquitoes, the area of behavior, temperature-wise, is limited. You have to get up above 15 Celsius to be able to start to have more mosquito activity. We all know that from going outside. And if you get above maybe 32 Celsius, something like that, then the activity goes way down. So there's a dependence on temperature, but also on precipitation drought. So that's our situation. So overall, our partnership, we're trying to improve this knowledge about how these climate factors affect West Nile. There have been a couple of studies done trying to put all this together. There have been hundreds of papers written about West Nile and temperature and precipitation. But Karen Holcomb tried to put this together in our first work with NOAA. And what we found is that you cannot beat persistence as a forecast. In other words, in a given county, if you had West Nile hospitalization cases last year, then that's the best predictor for being able to have something else this year. Can we improve on that? And a lot of people are trying to do that, but we haven't been able to show that yet. And actually, Karen had one paper here published in one of the health journals saying that that's the case. So we're in a tough situation, but we have a lot more to learn here. And we're not quite providing accuracy yet. So the data we have in the health side is really limited. So counties report on hospitalization cases. That's the only thing that we have to work with. And it's through this system called ArboNet. On the climate side, if you go back for, hindcasting, then we've got a couple of systems. When I first came into starting to work this year, I thought, oh, okay, we're in NOAA, we can get even better, gridded data in the past, go to use NLDAS or even historical herd data or something like that. It doesn't really matter at this point. So using PRISM is great to use that from Oregon State. And then also this GridMet data set that a lot of people in the health arena use from UC Merced. So upscaling the West Nile cases from the 3,100 counties. I mean, that's a lot of detail. It's great to have that, but the obvious thing was to try to do some kind of horizontal aggregation. So Karen Holcomb started this initially with some smaller hexagonal areas across the country. Ryan Hart continued that in trying to go to larger hexagon areas. And so this actually is some of the data from the regression testing showing for the West Nile annual cases. And now it's good to point out the West Nile season is really more in July, August, September. That's where all the more action and the hospitalization cases take place. So positive relationship between above average June temperature and from the Midwest across to even the mid-Atlantic states, the West Coast, and a negative one near the Texas area and the Gulf Coast, because now it's already a hot region. If it's even hotter than normal, then that might actually suppress the amount of mosquito activity in the West Nile cases, and that shows up in the statistics. But we found, and Ryan came up with this, why don't we use even larger areas and just go to use this NEON network, these climate domains with 16 of them across the country, and then start to do the same thing. And what Ryan found is, yep, that same negative correlation between June temperature and West Nile shows up in a little bit broader way here. We're trying to get the signal from the noise in that. So drought shows up also very importantly, and we'll show you more about that in just a second. By the way, Jason, we didn't get the updated slides, so that's too bad. Anyway, yeah. But generally, Ryan did some testing here with regression and found that most of our variables, maybe 2/3 of them that came out most highly were moisture related variables. They could be drought variables, and there's different ways of normalization that takes place with these different variables. But it was helpful to start to see something come out of that. And then this is now looking at these different 11 main regions across the country. And what Ryan found was that we started to have some better impact by using this climate-informed data versus not using it at all. And so that's what we're looking at here. And but then when we went to two variables in the regression, then we started to get even a better signal. This is relatively recent information. It's just a couple of months old. So Ryan is working on a paper to be able to publish this. And it would be this and some extension of this with the next postdoc we're hoping for, to be able to then work on that with S2S hindcast and then forecast data. So this is my last slide here. Using this regional aggregation, and we're trying to work with CDC to help to make this take place, has really helped us in getting some better information. Obviously, we're continuing to revise the regression data sets. This is sort of a supervised machine learning kind of situation because we're supervising it and trying to suggest key variables to use. And then at the last bullet right there at the bottom, obviously to move to the next step. So the next time we have one of these meetings, maybe not next year, but to keep reporting in this and progress toward having health and vector-borne disease prediction. That's it. Thank you.
You have time for questions? Okay, then. Stan, thanks so much.
Okay.
Oh, wait a second. I saw questions. I'm on.
Thank you.
Very interesting talk. I really have a very naive question. Is what you're showing the predictor is more likely mean teacher. Have you thought about if there is some extreme cases, either persistent drought or big wave, that kind of situation?
Yeah.
Some case studies to get.
Yeah, the question is, have we used some even more extreme event predictors? And we think that actually, this is kind of the questions we have with our CDC friends and our postdocs a lot. We think that those actually are already being addressed within the data sets, these anomalies. So we're using this 24-year, 23-year period. So it's going back through all of that. And so when we have, month-long, we're using month-long averages. So heat waves will show up in drought periods, will show up absolutely in those data sets. I'm going to go back here to, for instance, here is desert Southwest. Okay. So this turns out there's a relationship. I mean, just as the West Nile season starts, okay, there's a relationship that showed up there. And it's actually, this is actually with a negative anomaly. So it would be a year in when the desert Southwest has cooler temperatures. And then you see the second variable there also is July precipitation. So this would be a year in which the Southwest monsoon is stronger, the temperatures are lower, the precipitation, and that actually is exactly when statistics. So if we could predict that well with Southwest monsoon, then we could also do. So I think we're sort of addressing that, but thank you for asking, and we'll be publishing these things, and people like you can help us think about that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
It's not a question since I know,
My colleague,
but
good.
it's more to
And great.
provide some context. Yeah, hi, I'm great. But to sort of build on the discussion that was just taking place, one thing is that the PDSI is an aggregate over multiple months. So that's one way. The droughts, Palmer droughts are indexed. So that is one way that we can go, longer term extremes into this. And then just also, I think anecdotally, last year, 2023, like the Farmington, Colorado had a very abnormally wet May, And there's actually, I was talking with Stan and West Ryan, gee, is there going to be a big spike in West Nile virus cases because there's all this standing water? And actually, there was standing there in the part of Colorado. So I think that they're, you know, obviously that's anecdotal, but and then another example was Maricopa County, Arizona, which is where Phoenix is in 2021 standard. Where they had a tremendous outbreak, and it was driven by climate driven by climate anomaly. So I really do think that there is value in these data sets, both at the monthly and also the longer time scale.
We're out. Come find Thunder Me today.
Stan, thank you so much. Really great discussion. Going to move right on to our next discussion here. John Callahan, talking about coastal tide flooding tied to S2S forecasting. John?
Thank you, Jason. I'm sharing my screen right now.
Oh, John, I thought you were in the room. My bad.
No, I'm sorry.
Sharing. Go ahead and share your screen, John. There we go. We see you.
Okay.
Might want to put the slideshow view. It'd be a little easier for us to see on this end.
Yep. How does that look?
Could you go into the slideshow view?
Yeah. Share screen. There we go.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you. Looks good, Jason.
Good to go.
Okay, thank you. Great. My talk here, looking at coastal high tide flooding prediction, subseasonal-to-seasonal timescale. You can see my collaborators right underneath. I work very closely with Greg and Billy in NOAA National Ocean Service, particularly in co-ops. A lot of this work is done. Gwen and Karen also a very part of this project, looking at the model skills, looking at applications of these projects, and different ways that we could reach out to the stakeholders and figure out what kind of needs that they have as we develop our systems here. Greg and Billy, to note, also spoke at the last workshop last year, talking about some of the subseasonal needs we have in the ocean service. Okay, high tide flooding, it's a very interesting kind of phenomenon. And you can see here some news items that happened in Charleston, South Carolina, where it's something that when you get flooding, typically people call it shallow flooding or minor flooding sometimes, sunny day flooding, etc., where you start to get increasing flooding on the roads. And sometimes it's not from a big storm. Sometimes it's from the high tides with a small storm or light winds. Maybe the water is abnormally high that year, particularly many different reasons. And you start to see applications and impacts that it has throughout. You might get flooding, typical, we would think in South Carolina, in that area where we get a lot of tropical systems. They, of course, would cause flooding and are more likely to cause flooding if the waters are already high. But then as the different storms come in and sea level rise continues to happen, you start to see these things happen a little bit more frequently, where maybe something that was a strong storm in the past, now the flooding on the roads, particularly because of the elevation we have our infrastructure, where the communities are, this kind of flooding starts happening with smaller kinds of meteorological impacts or oceanic forcing, etc. So they happen a lot more frequent. Here's a time series, particularly looking at that location in Charleston, South Carolina, and you can see the water levels here. And that horizontal line you're seeing is a threshold where flooding starts to occur, let's say on a road or in properties. The first 50 years or so, this threshold was crossed roughly 10 times. So it's one time every 5 years or so. And you can see in the last couple of decades, the frequency has increased significantly. It's really, it's an exponential increase in the number of days that flooding does occur. And this is what actually, causes the impacts on the ground. This is what impacts the economy, the public safety, the damage to infrastructure. Sometimes that damage or that risk doesn't come from how deep the water is or how severe that flooding, even though that causes a lot of damage. but sometimes you get a lot simply by the frequency increasing. And if you have an exponential increase moving from once every 5 years to 5 times, 10 times, 20 times per year, yeah, that can cause a significant impact. If we look at just, and you can see here on this graph, you can see sea level rise occurring over the past 50, 60 years, 70 years, and it's it's accelerating maybe in the past decade or two, but over this long time period, it's like a relatively gradual linear increase, but the increase in number of days exponentially would increase even from a linear sea level rise rate. And looking at that last 5 years, you can see when those flooding days occur. And a couple of things to note here is, one, they occur in bunches. You know, we kind of know that, right? Different parts of the country have different times or different seasons when the flooding occurs quite a lot. In this particular case, you could see the fall area, tropical systems, late summer, water expands, etc. But you could also see that seasonality in there. And we can hopefully take advantage of that, right? You can gradually move this up seasonally, well, from sea level rise. And as that goes up, that same area with a projection just for the next 20, 30 years will go now from 10 floods a year to 40 floods per year, 45 floods per year. This would be 45 days per year where you see flooding happening. So it's a significant issue. It's only going to get worse, but there are aspects of this climate system, of course, the seasonality, and the tidal predictions that I'll talk about in a minute, that hopefully we can take advantage of having predictions on that seasonal time frame. It is very critical as we're doing this, that horizontal line is to figure out what is that threshold. And this is already being done by the Weather Service and all their field offices. They come up with these coastal advisory thresholds from minor, moderate, and major on when that flooding may happen. And that's when warnings, emergency management, et cetera, those activities really start to pick up. That minor threshold is really that kind of key. And we use that as a threshold to figure out, you know, our prediction systems on when it's going to cross that threshold. What is the likelihood? And that's really what our model is doing. What is the likelihood water is going to cross that minor threshold when flooding will begin to occur? We could use that not only for warning activities, but also as a measure throughout the years on the impact of sea level rise for different areas. There are many different processes, of course, that can cause coastal flooding. We see those things that are like weather, they're chaotic, right? They're the subseasonal, hourly, even daily. And we have those long-term timescales, right? Those climate modes that might make a favorable event on when the weather can cause the weather, or kind of the more high resolution, high frequency processes that can cause flooding. But we also have that middle ground. In my background is climate and meteorology, so it's really interesting to look at those tide predictions, right? They're a large signal in many areas, ranges of 1 or 2 meters in some places, 3, even 4 meters other places. And that's a big range for the tides, and they are predictable. So it's a large signal, it's a predictable aspect, and can we take advantage of that for our predictions on these subseasonal, seasonal timescales? You can see that here on different parts of the country. That first graph on the left-hand side shows you the variance of our daily maximum water level. So if we looked at the highest point per day of a water level, and you can see the different areas that, really the higher latitudes that have that higher variance. That's on the left panel, excuse me. And on the right panel, you can see that the ratio of just the tidal predictions, if you look at those kind of the tidal astronomical forcing to the ratio of our observations, you can see the areas along the West Coast particularly, and in the upper Northeast, and actually some in the Southeast, where the tidal prediction is a larger signal and explains a relatively large amount of the variance of the observations we see. So the different kinds of storms might occur on top of that, but there are many days where that tidal prediction is a big part of it. So the outlook that we have, and this is what we currently have going, is that if we look at on the subseasonal to seasonal likelihood, how can we take advantage of the information that we have, looking at past data, and we used about 20 years for our past data to develop the statistical model, and kind of separate what we see in the water level to these different components, right? And then if we look at these individual components, each one can be treated differently, but if we add them together, then it kind of gives us, kind of a probability of when that water is going to cross that threshold. And these are the components we see, that those tidal predictions, We add on the sea level rise trend in that local area, and we know different parts of the country have different rates of sea level rise. We look at where that threshold is, develop these distributions on the differences between where our tidal predictions get us plus the sea level rise trend, and then develop these monthly distributions because we have a lot of seasonality in place here. And what is the likelihood that that can cause increases over that threshold? You also have, of course, we have this persistence. If we already know we're running high, the water levels are running high for whatever reason, particularly with the seasonality, but also you can think about expansion of the waters, ocean currents, etc. They all contribute. So if we take a kind of a top-down approach, are we running high now? That influences and actually improves our skill at looking at what those distributions might be. So these different pieces that we can treat even separately on how to get at maybe improving our model for the prediction on whether we're going to cross that threshold or not. Here's an example of how well it's doing. This is, again, the Charleston location for one particular year. And you can see on top, the blue is the observations, and the orange is the tidal prediction part, right? That astronomical tidal prediction part. And you can see this model by looking at the past 20 years of observations and persistence, etc. It does predict certain days where that water level will cross. That difference, right? That what we call kind of that, think about the freeboard of that residual, will actually cross over to that threshold. And again, Charleston, we see this prediction a lot in the fall time period. We do have based on some trial and error and looking at the model, if our model has a 5% warning on those water levels to cross that threshold, that's when we kind of highlight in our product, yes, coastal flooding is or could be likely to occur in this area. So it's doing pretty well, the model itself. If we just kind of look at, roughly 61 over 92 gauges, even without looking at that persistence, right? This is from a paper that Dusek and all, Greg worked on, published just only about a year and a half ago. So this is still relatively new for us. But not even with that persistence, that monthly anomaly on where we are, not even bringing that in, just looking at the other pieces that we've talked about. Skillful, about 2/3 of the locations, about 35% overall was predicted the tides with a decent false alarm rate, only about 10%, which is pretty good. And you can see that the hard parts are kind of in that mid-Atlantic area. It's kind of hard to cover up, but some of those blue dots mean it's not really skillful at all. And also the Gulf Coast. The tidal signal is not that large here, and we get most of the coastal flooding coming from tropical systems. When you add persistence, it does do a very good job on the West Coast, where there is kind of a longer time scale. There is a longer memory, a stronger memory in that seasonality. And so we actually get improvements for 1 month and 3 months time frame. That persistence is very key for different parts of the country, particularly the West Coast. And here's a screenshot of just our current product. I mentioned that 5% threshold, that if the model is looking at 5% or more, likelihood of the water levels crossing that threshold, kind of on top of those tide predictions, we color those days over on our calendar system. We got red. If it's above 50%, much higher, we give it a dark red. So this is a product that we really just released within the past year. We're continuing improvement on not only the R&D in the back end, but also how users interact with that, different features and other information we can include on the website to give to users. Okay, if we look at the different parts to it, and this is the actual model part itself, the statistical part, what is the likelihood that that threshold is going to be crossed, right? That the still water level, this is sea surface heights, that still the water level is above that threshold. And it could be broken into kind of a seasonal cycle, those tides, and then that residual part. And if we look at it that way, there's a lot of work going on with co-ops, myself, Greg, Billy, Greg and Karen, the people I mentioned, plus several others, that if we look at different kinds of trends, right, that influences where we are, right, from our tidal predictions and bringing that up to where we are in the current month, the current year, excuse me, and then that seasonal cycle could be on top of that. So looking at that trend and that sea level rise is actually a very tricky problem. And our astronomical predictions, right, that's not, it's a science that's deterministic, but there are so many different pieces to the tide small improvements on even centimeters can actually influences that likelihood of that residual. So these are ongoing statistical methods that we're looking at and looking at trends and astronomical predictions. But if we take a look at just that residual, right, the above part, this is where the climate forcing comes in. Maybe that persistence that we have now is really just a statistical persistence, but the idea is that we can work on this, that maybe the climate model forecast, the sea surface height forecast that we get from different kinds of models, and we've seen maybe John Albert's talk yesterday looking at the European IFS system to look at the forecast of sea level heights, sea surface heights. And those hourly residuals, there are different kinds of statistical distributions that you can take from that the models give us. So this is work that's going on with the Physical Science Lab and OAR. We're working very closely with them, and this is kind of a core part of their research for the next couple of years. Coming very soon, we have the core reanalysis that actually looks at, it's a water level reanalysis. We have hourly from 1980 to 2023. Now this can kind of help improve our large scale statistical predictions of our observations, right? Those the statistical distributions, and giving us a good understanding of what happens between the gauges, not just at the gauges. So this is coming in the next few months. Within the next year, we'll use that to improve our observations. Last slide here is to look at some of our needs on top of this. Right now, we have no real climate forecast, and it's all based on climatologies. Those tidal predictions take advantage of that and distributions from the past. We're looking at maybe we can have these model forecasts on that maybe weeks 1-8 monthly afterward, trying to go out to 12 months, but it looks realistically maybe 3 to 6 months we get much better skill. And the kinds of information that we need, we're looking at different kinds of downscaling methods, right? We have the models in the ocean, but we're trying to get at these tide gauges. So sea level pressure, wind direction and speed, precipitation and temperature are all big parts of it, but also so is the ocean. So looking at these forecasts on that subseasonal-seasonal timescale would really not only give us these sea surface height predictions out in the ocean, but also enable us to downscale and give us a more accurate prediction on the land, at the gauges, or even between the gauges, and help us get these warnings out to the users at hopefully these weekly to monthly timescales for their preparation for coastal flooding. Right, that is it. Thank you very much. And if you have questions, myself or Greg, my emails are up there. If you're more interested in this model, again, this is very new, and some of our research that we have going on at the moment. Thank you.
John, thank you for that. In consideration of time, we're going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Kristi. Forgive me if I get your last name wrong. Arsenault? Hey, I got close. All right. Let me get your presentation up. There we are. Just share. Come on.
Hi, thank you for coming. Today, we're going to be discussing the global hydro-intelligence system that's been designed for not just the U.S. Air Force, but it's been used for a lot of different users, part of the Defense Department, but beyond. So we're just going to talk about some of the highlights of the system that we've been developing at NASA Goddard. And from the GHI team, it's just representation of some of the different subsystems from that. So just give you a little background. The U.S. Air Force has been gone through a lot of iterations over many decades, and the 557 Weather Wing is its current version of what provides all the meteorological and other climate and hydrology information to a lot of different groups, and basically routine geospatial information to help make decisions from the U.S. military and other government agencies on a global scale. There's also additional users that are part of the kind of the federal enterprise and other universities as well. The basically what has been going on since about 1958, it's been a global land data assimilation system. NOAA has one, NASA has one. This has been an ongoing development over many decades. But U.S. Air Force is one of the oldest. And since its inception, it has seen a variety of different, oops, sorry. There's a microphone there. There's a lot of different additions that have been made into the system from over the years since that 1958. And when it started introducing the Land Information System, which is developed at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, it began to grow even further, being able to ingest a variety of different satellite data sets, different models. So it's grown in what it's used in its near real-time operational configuration. And in its most recent configuration, it's been using a variety of different NASA products, including NOAA products in the satellite for the simulation and the initial conditions that set up for the different forecasts. So one of the main missions for the 557 is to provide this most enhanced operational land system that provides these kind of resources and information for the global land, but it also provides those for initial conditions for forecast systems. So the GHI spans 4 different timescales. The 3 I'll be talking mostly today are about the near real time, the medium range, and subseasonal to seasonal. We also do climate projections going out 100 years. So there's 4 different timescales that are part of the GHI timeframes. The underlying software that goes into developing this global land data simulation system for the Air Force is NASA's Land Information System framework. And it's considered basically a high-performance modeling software system, but it also basically integrates a lot of different land surface models, hydrology models. It assimilates a variety of different satellite products. It has a lot of different assimilation techniques. So there's a variety of information that we can ingest into the system that can be used for not just hydrology, but as a system to feed back to atmospheric or other models, including runoff coastal models and such. So the system has been developed since about 2001, 2002, coming up in NASA Goddard. And it is developed into a variety of also applications. We work a lot also from agriculture, forecasting to, there's just a variety that goes out beyond just what U.S. Air Force, believe it or not, has a lot of reach that it supports even the hydrology in a lot of other parts of the world. So there's a lot that the Land Information System software framework provides in developing its products and applications. Just to kind of give a little background what some of the inputs are to the system. So specifically for the GHI, we're using a blended NASA U.S. Air Force precipitation analysis. It's a combination of different observations, in situ, cloud-based, satellite, and also numerical weather prediction. And so the acronym we come up with is NAFPA. Eric Kemp from our team published a paper in 2022. At the bottom, you can find the article if you'd like to look at it. Just basically, it's a breadth-up analysis of combining these different products into a more enhanced analysis that we use to drive near real-time off-land land surface models and hydrology models. And then also for the different subsystems, just to kind of point out just kind of the breakdown of some of the characteristics of these different systems. So for the near real-time medium range, we have a climatology that goes back to about late 2007. For the S2S, we extended it back to 1991 to extend our hindcast initial conditions, and that uses the MERIT-2 and CHIRPS for precipitation, which are bias corrected to the forcings used by the near real-time. And so the near real-time and others are used at a 10-kilometer spatial resolution. The S2S, because we're combining a lot of different models, including the NMME. So we have a multi-model ensemble there, so a lot more members. So we are at a 25-kilometer resolution. And we also use the CFS for other non-precipitation forcing fields for the S2S. For our assimilated data products, we use a combination. Mostly right now, the states that we target are snow and soil moisture. For the snow product, we have our own in-house snow enhanced product, which is the U.S. Air Force Snow and Ice Analysis. Team member Xiaosong has developed that, and you can find his publication here at the bottom if you'd like to read more about that. And that was an extension of the original U.S. Air Force snow depth. I know here at NOAA, people do use snow, or had in the past used snow depth for some of the analysis here. The soil moisture products, we do use NOAA's SWAPS ASCAT for part of a timeframe going back to 2013. And then since 2015, we've been ingesting SMAP, soil moisture, as part of the assimilated suite of products into the GHI. And so over the time, these three particular subsystems, again, we use all the multivariate DA for the NRT and for the initial conditions for the medium range timeframe. And then for the S2S right now, we're using just the SMAP DA as part of our initial conditions for the S2S. And so just to kind of get a few examples of these different products that go into our initial conditions and our analysis. The snow DA, when we generated the US Air Force SI product, it was a greater enhancement over the original snow depth products. And so on the right, just a couple different regional patterns where you see areas of red, where they're against the snow depth gauge, snow gauges. You're seeing improvement in the US snow ice product over the original snow depth. So it was a greater enhancement. And then in the future, the plans are to now switch to a more machine learning based system to produce the snow enhanced products. So those will be going live the next year or two. So this is undergoing right now in that production and work. So eventually we'll have US SI up to that point, and then we'll be switching out to the machine learning based products. For SMAP, there are a variety of different SMAP products, and there are some that are high resolution. Many people probably are familiar with the 36-kilometer resolution SMAP soil moisture, and there's now more enhanced versions coming out of JPL and other site centers. So we actually are developing our own in-house, because sometimes at the higher resolution, there's a greater latency. So to reduce that, we are creating our own optimized product that's at 9-kilometer with the lower latency. So on the right here are just a few examples. Louisiana in the upper left. On the right, the Korean Peninsula. On the left, lower left is the California coastline. So you can see where there's the enhancement on the left in each of the figures of the 9-kilometer product over the original 36-kilometer product. That's considered their level 2 near real-time SMAP products. So just a few examples from the system. I'll show, this is an example from the medium range. I know yesterday there was a great talk about some of the flooding that happened in California, the atmospheric rivers. This is a big concern on the West Coast and other parts of the world as well. But there was this major rain event that stacked up events going from about late December to early January 2023. I was actually there experiencing at Disneyland. It was a lot of rain. But here we're showing on the lower left, in this figure here, it's just showing the accumulation of rainfall. So on the left, this was from one of the NOAA WPC total precipitation accumulation maps, just to kind of give a sense of space of where a lot of the accumulation was during that time period. So on the upper right here, we're seeing some of the enhanced rainfall that was affected over especially the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River Valley areas. There was a lot of flooding. So the lower left in that row, you're seeing an 8-day flood inundation forecast. So we actually also produce streamflow from our HIMAP modeling system as part of this. So we capture streamflow area like inundation, flood diffraction. These are some examples of forecasting a few days in advance that flooded events. And then on the far right, that's just showing the difference between lead day 6, actually lead day 8, sorry, minus the initial condition day, showing just how much accumulated change had happened over those 8-day period. So that's the medium range system. I'm actually leading on the S2S side. So it's kind of thought I would give you a little more highlights here on the S2S. So this is showing some of the hindcast root zone soil moisture, which is the top 1 meter of our land surface models. And so this is a highlight from our NOMP 401, which we're using in the S2S system at this time. And so this is showing just some of the skill correlation on top, RMSE on the bottom, just progressing over 4 different lead months, going from initial month of 0 out to lead 4. So you're seeing a progression for the November initial conditions, that there's a lot of skill still retained in the root zone soil moisture from the initial conditions. So that's just kind of showing some of the strength of the system going out and looking at root zone soil moisture as one of the predictors, like agricultural drought or other kind of factors in that type of products that people are interested in, especially through the Air Force and other agencies. This is another example. These are more kind of event-based. This is kind of showing one of the extreme droughts, La Nina. Oops, sorry, it just keeps jumping out at me. Anyway, there is, as you know, there was a 3-year La Nina series of events that happened recently, and so a lot of the northern Middle East regions affected by a lot of drought, warm temperatures, persistent hot weather during the spring months. And so the upper panel here is just showing surface air temperature anomalies for the month of July. And so on the bottom left, this is CFS air temperatures predicted 2 months out. And so we are capturing that in the CFS in our anomalies. And on the right, that's the root zone soil moisture. So where the reds are showing really extreme drought preserved in that root zone soil moisture. So there was a correlation that we saw going with this event. And we also looked at some extreme, so this is surface soil moisture on the right, the top 10 centimeters of NOAA. And so we were seeing really high anomalies, that the purple area is really wet conditions. And so this was from May 2022, initial condition, and looking out 2 months in advance, we saw these really wet conditions, and we did able to forecast not just from initial conditions, but also from NMME precipitation. There was some very, very wet conditions throughout parts of Australia, which we captured in our forecast. Some of the application needs. So getting back to the session at hand, what we're coming here to gather about, some of the needs that we've identified from our own S2S hydrometeorological applications, not just working with the Air Force, but across different agencies like USAID. It's really important to have, sufficient hindcast records. A lot of times, and I've heard this at most recent S2S meetings, they want to shorten the hindcast records to capture more of the more recent warming events. So there's these kind of dialogues happening of what time frame should we capture. But sometimes when hydrology, you've heard them talking about we need longer time frames to do recurrent interval, type measurements and looking at when events are reoccurring. These kind of things are very important for a variety of different applications. Big one for me has been the spatial resolution. I've been modeling for a long time, and sometimes high resolution does get better detail. And so when we get the data at 1 degree, we lose a lot of that detail, especially in rainfall. It's just a big driver for hydrometeorological forecast. The forcing field, sometimes we may only get temperature and precip. In some hydrology models, some run with just daily temperature precip, but a lot of the land source models need sub-daily, and they need a variety of different input forcings, including radiation and winds, which sometimes we don't always get. So we have to fill in with other, it could be an ERA or MERA2, climate analysis, climatology. We prefer to have consistency across all the fields for many reasons, but it's very important actually. And offering different timescales. I know NMME comes at daily and monthly, but it's not consistent across the different modeling centers and what's being put out. And so usually for a lot of our modeling systems, sub-daily is very important. And then finally, just routine community announcements. A lot of times there's not a lot of announcements that we get to receive in advance enough to adjust our systems, because a lot of times we have to rerun the models, which takes time. So if we're only given a month's notice, we could be delayed, or we can lose a lot of what we had set up in our system. We lose a lot of that fidelity in what we were producing for accuracy for our end users. I'll just mention really quick here, because I'm running out of time, just to mention from an initial condition point of view, it's another important part of our skill and our forecast. And I've seen this mentioned now a few times, just avoiding those initial shocks, minimizing those when you go from different, throughout your long history, your retrospective and hindcast runs. Sometimes you might have different satellite records available, how to make sure they're all within the same kind of modes, and moments of different means and standard deviations across those timeframes, across the different data sets being used. And also incorporating human signals. The signals themselves have been, we don't capture a lot of these in our modeling, whether it's irrigation or groundwater depletion or things like that. It's very important for a lot of our forecast. And then just accounting for the non-stationary and our hindcast records if we go back in time. And anyways, just how do we capture some of those recent warmings and change? So I'll end here. Just a quick summary since time is wrapping up. Just basically we've developed for the U.S. Air Force over many years the land information system, which they use as part of their initial conditions, but also hydrology and other applications. And so we were doing it across 4 different timescales, which here we showed a few different examples and assimilating a lot of different satellite and other products used to help improve those analysis. And so with that, I'll end and take any questions if there's time.
I do apologize. We are running a little short on time, Kristi, but please continue the conversation afterwards at coffee. We'll move into our final speaker now, Remi Abel, enhancing subseasonal ensemble streamflow predictions using post-process precip forecast to inform resampling. Interesting. So, floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Jason. Okay, I know I'm what's between you and the coffee, so I will try to get us through it. Again, my name is Remi Abel. I am going to be talking about ensemble streamflow predictions at subseasonal timescales. I want to note first that the lead author on this is actually Dr. Erin Towler, who works with me at NOAA's Physical Sciences Laboratory. So she actually put this all together, and I'm just sharing it with you because I'm here. And also note this wide array of collaborators that we have, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So before I dive into ensemble streamflow forecast, I wanted to take a minute and contextualize this in the bigger project that it sits with in our work in Physical Sciences Laboratory. So we have a project that's funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, focused on next generation water model development activities, focused on improvements to NOAA's water forecasts. And we want to do this in sort of related to how we can connect with the Office of Water Prediction's next gen development activities, which are ongoing and rapidly evolving. And also sort of make sure that we can, as Physical Sciences Laboratory, bring some research, longer term research things to the table. And the way we decided sort of to carve up this project in terms of the activities, you can see we have a range of activities that span various time horizons, all the way from state estimation out to decadal and longer predictions, as well as several different elements of the hydrologic system, so hydrologic forecasting of snow and its impact on stream flow and drought. The way we decided on this was not only like what can PSL do, which was an obvious part of it, but also through identification of partners and stakeholders, both inside and outside of NOAA, with whom we can partner and who are sort of asking for improvements in this in these areas. So for example, our partnerships developing snow and its impact on streamflow have been in conjunction with the California-Nevada River Forecast Center, working with some of their data and then incorporating it with some new methods that we're developing. Similarly with drought, we are working with Highland Wen, who talked yesterday from the Climate Prediction Center. And then we also even have some developing activities with the sort of land side of fisheries focused on stream flow temperatures. But getting right to the focus of today's talk, we're working with NOAA's Office of Water Prediction on ensemble precipitation and stream flow predictions at sort of weather to seasonal timescales. And for today's purposes, I'm going to focus on subseasonal. So you heard yesterday, if you attended, Royce Fontenot talked a bit about the Hydrologic Ensemble Forecast Service. This is an ensemble prediction system that provides ensemble streamflow predictions at various timescales, again, from weather all the way out to seasonal. And Royce mentioned yesterday that actually the timescale where it shifts from weather forecast information to seasonal or climatological information develops varies based on the River Forecast Center. For our purposes, we're using the HEF's baseline validation run, and in that in those data, the switch from this weather forecast information to climatological happens at the 14-day horizon. So on 1 to 14-day timescales, the streamflow ensemble forecast from this HEF system use post-processed GEFS, Global Ensemble Forecast System, precipitation and temperature for watersheds where that's needed. But then at longer timescales in this HEF system, the streamflow ensemble forecasts actually use resampled precipitation and temperature climatology to provide the information that they need to run those hydro forecasts. So the first question that we've asked here is whether or not there are skillful subseasonal ensemble precipitation forecasts, and you see that string of words there is already a little bit problematic, that we could use to enhance subseasonal streamflow forecasts. And it turns out PSL has a fairly long legacy working toward enhancement of precipitation forecasts using statistical post-processing techniques. Lots of that work has been done at the weather timescale, but there's been recent work done by my colleague Rochelle Warsnap at PSL to develop some precipitation forecasts at the subseasonal timescale using GEFS and then some statistical post-processing techniques, both some more traditional techniques. The censored shifted gamma distribution is the technique she tested, as well as experimental neural network technique that she's called RUFCO. And she has a paper that's under review demonstrating the skill of this precipitation post-processing technique for weeks 3 and 4. And so here on the top is the raw GEFS. This is the skill, the cumulative rank probability skill score for accumulations of weeks 3 to 4. And you can see basically that it's gray everywhere, which means that there's no skill. Both CGSD and this neural network technique do show some skill, but you can see if you look at the numbers here on the color bar that this is pretty marginal. There's just a little bit of skill here to get, but we're going to test and see whether or not this can enhance streamflow, even because there is a little bit of skill available at this time scale. So these experimental forecasts are actually online. If you're interested in looking at them, you can go to this link here and you can take a look. They're experimentally operational, so you can see them going in real time. And an example here is from May 6th of 2024. You can see that this system predicts an enhanced likelihood of wet conditions. And we're focused in our efforts, which I'll describe more about why, on Texas because of a collaboration we have. So this is just an example of forecast from this system. And so this post-processing of streamflow, one way we could take advantage of this post-processed precipitation is through post-processing the streamflow that we have to reflect this probabilistic climate forecast. And basically, we know that the predictions of streamflow that we have now are based on just a sort of mean historical climate. Can we resample those to see if we can get some enhancement in the predictive skill of streamflow? And it's a simple, effective approach that Erin has actually used before. She's a 2022 paper demonstrating the viability of this as a way to enhance streamflow predictions. And it's been less adopted at this sort of subseasonal timescale. The paper from 2022 is actually on a longer time horizon. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the mechanics of how we're doing this. This is kind of work that's in development. But again, recall on weather timescales, basically the post-processed GEFS are used as inputs to the hydrologic model. So you basically take the ensemble of precipitation and temperature forecasts as you need, run them through the hydrologic model, and then you get streamflow ensembles. Again, at these subseasonal timescales, the HEFS uses this resampled climatology. We could also use post-process precipitation directly, but we're not going to try that yet. We're going to start with just resampling the climatology. And if we resample the climatology, we then would apply weighting to the streamflow traces based on these subseasonal precipitation week 3-4 forecasts. So in the HEFS output that we get now at weeks 3 and 4, we basically have these 31 equally weighted traces. We associate each of those traces based on whether the precipitation that was associated with them is above or below the median. And then we would take the forecasts that we get from this RUFCO or from the CGSD precipitation forecast that Rochelle developed, and we weight those based on, again, their precipitation forecast and this likelihood of above median precipitation. And again, in this case, we're focused on a watershed in Texas for applications. And we don't really have results yet, so we're basically just setting this up. We have the workflow put together, but we are partnering with Mark Fresh from Office of Water Prediction, who is the HEF system. And he provided us with HEF's ensemble streamflow hindcasts from their baseline validation runs that use the GEFS version 12 hindcasts, and that's what we're going to resample to sort of test this hypothesis. And if you're interested, you can hear more about the HEF system later today. Mark will be talking. We're also, as I mentioned, focused on a Texas watershed, and the reason for that is that this aligns with activities of a collaborator, Xiaosong, at University of Texas, Arlington, and affiliated with these forecast-informed reservoir operations activities. So for both OWP and UTA are actually using the HEF system themselves to do some of these tests, and we're going to provide them with the precipitation forecast so they can test it in the operational system. But we are developing at PSL an in-house capacity to use the next-gen national water model framework. We're building it from the GitHub basically, and working with the next-gen partners to get that working. And that again wraps back to that broader project focused on the objectives of our Build NextGen project. So our hypothesis here, again, we don't have a lot of results, but our hypothesis here is that the S2S probabilistic precipitation forecasts can weigh ensemble members, and that this will translate, skillful precipitation forecasts will translate to improved stream flow, but results are yet to come. So we're doing a systematic evaluation of the hindcast period for these watersheds that I described. We have one in Texas, and we also are focused on one in California for, again, relating back to FURO activities. And we're going to test if, how, and when the skill in these subseasonal precipitation ensembles translates to streamflow ensembles. I will say that this application depends on the GEFS version 12 hindcasts, and that they'll need to be recalibrated to GEFS version 13. And I want to emphasize the point that we do actually need the longer hindcasts. I think it's really critical for hydrologic purposes that we have longer hindcasts so we can calibrate the models. And also note that this weighting technique is pretty general, and it can be applied to other S2S products. So with that, I'll conclude. Thanks.
Mimi, thank you so much. And to our virtual viewers, I apologize. I'm not sure what happened. I think our Mimi's presentation froze about halfway through, so you've been stuck on the same slide for about 5 minutes. We'll get that fixed going forward. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank all of our speakers for this session and for both parts we've had. Mark, any thoughts before we close? Mark's good. Everyone, a coffee break will continue until 10:30, and then we'll be back for our next session. Thank you all very much.